This is Dan Abbott. I teach at Southern Maine Community College. This is lecture 5 in the series of video lectures for AEDD260 CAD Management at Southern Maine Community College. On this one, we're going to be looking at customizing the line types in AutoCAD. And this is also a programming exercise in a sense. It involves using a text file to define line types. What we're looking at right now is an AutoCAD drawing with two different viewports. One of the viewports I have line types that are from the ACAD ISO line type file, and the other I have line types that are from the ACAD LAN file. Line types in AutoCAD are defined by a text file, and they look like this. Just a series of instructions on how to set up a line type. I want to start over here though to make a point. We have two different versions of this line type file, and the hatch patterns are the same. Two different versions, an ISO or metric version, International Standards Organization, and a non-metric or imperial version, the US. And it's because AutoCAD doesn't really differentiate between millimeters and inches or anything else. You're drawing in units in AutoCAD. It's possible to set something called insert units to specific units like metric or feet or whatever, but the actual drawing itself just uses units and doesn't really know the difference between inches, millimeters, meters, feet, or anything else. I frequently draw nautical chart course lines and track lines and stuff using nautical miles as my unit. I just draw in AutoCAD, and if I put 8, I mean 8 nautical miles. If you do drawings for civil, you're probably drawing in feet. 100 means 100 feet. Millimeters, 100 means 100 millimeters. So as a result, in order for line types to look right in both metric or inches, you have to have separate definitions for each one. And I'll show you what I mean. If we take a look at the top, these came from the ACAD ISO line type file. And if we say, for instance, here in this phantom line, I'm going to estimate the space between right here, what that little gap is right there. I'm going to estimate it because I can't snap to those locations because they're not endpoints to a line. I'm going to say, what's the distance from? And I'm just use my cursor to start there and go approximately to here. And it's about 3 units. That would be 3 millimeters. I'll come down here where the drawing is done in inches and do the same thing. Say, what's the distance from that gap here to about here? 0.112. In other words, that's actually 0.125. It's about 1/8 of an inch, which is the same dimension, more or less, as 3 millimeters. Not exactly, but it's close. So 3 millimeters for that gap, 1/8 of an inch for this gap. Since units are the same in either case, you're talking about a much smaller gap here than you are here. 125.4 or 25.4 times larger for the metric one. Same is true with the gas line. If I have some text right here, and I make that text 2.5, and I type in the word gas, that's the height of the text in a complex line type. If I come down here and do the same thing, I have to set the height to 0.1 in order to get the same height that you have in the... Actually, this probably was 3 now that I look at it. And I have to set that to 0.1 to get the same height here. So how is that defined? Well, it's defined in 2 files, the ACAD-ISO.LAN file and the ACAD.LAN file. I showed you last lecture that you could open those files and make sure you got the one that was in the current support directory by typing start app, notepad in quotation marks, parentheses, find file, ACAD-ISO.LIN is going to open up the metric version of that, and it looks like this. Now I'm going to go down and find the phantom line type. And the phantom line type that I used was actually called Phantom 2. And if we take a look at how this line type definition works, it's this. To define a phantom line, and that's the one we use right here, I use the Phantom 2, Hidden 2, Center 2. I just think that looks better for both metric and for imperial drawing. But if we take a look, oh, I know I need to scroll down because I've got my icons set up a lot larger. So this is what we're looking at right here. If we take a look at the phantom line type, phantom 2, which is right here, it indicates something is 15.875 and then a negative 3.175 and then a positive 3.175. These values represent the lengths of the segment that get displayed for a phantom 2 line type. The 15.875 is the distance from that point to this point. Gaps are indicated with negative numbers, negative 3.175. That's an exact conversion factor. No reason for it to be that precise. 3 would have been just fine, but whoever wrote these files originally, that's what they did, is they converted directly from inches into millimeters. So you have a long value that's positive. That's a long line segment. Let's go over here. That long line segment right here. Negative 3.175 is that gap. Positive 3.175 is the length of that segment. Negative 3.175 is that gap. Positive 3.175 is this one. Negative 3.175 is that gap. And if you look over here, that's exactly what they're laying out, and then it stops. What AutoCAD will do is open up this file, and it'll simply repeat that pattern as long as it can. It must, however, have at least the sum of all those values long in a line type in order for it to break down. Now, if we look down below here, I'm going to open up the other line type, not the one that has ISO in it, but the one that says ACAD LIN. Open that one up. We'll go find the phantom line type there. And the phantom 2 line type here, the initial long segment is 0.625. That's 0.625 inches. And then what's the size of the gap? 1/8 of an inch. What do you get when you convert 1/8 of an inch into millimeters? 3.125, 3.175. So now it's the same exact kind of definition, except all those values are converted between the two of them so that one represents inches, the other represents millimeters. That's why there are 2 files. For your assignment, you're going to have to create some additional line types, and you're going to have to do the same line type in both files. And then you'll save those files and upload them to Brightspace. So the format here, and again, whenever you're trying to do something new with a new kind of programming language, look for something that works and duplicate it. The format here is that we have 2 lines representing each line type. As far as the phantom goes, we have an asterisk, the name of a line type. Then we have is that the display? I'm going to find out. Let me go back and look at the line type dialog box. Oops. The line type dialog box, we're going to go and load. So if you look over here in this display under phantom, it's called phantom or phantom 2. That's how it's listed. So in the there we go. And here, the first thing that's listed there is the display of what it is that you're creating. The next thing is simply a description of what it is for the purpose of looking at this particular file. Then this is simply to show you what it would look like when it was broken down using the underline command. Nothing in this line creates or defines anything. What it does is identifies the name that's displayed and then gives you a description. So the asterisk basically is saying to AutoCAD, this is not the description of the line type. It's down here. They all start with the letter A. It stands for aligned. At one time that apparently had some purpose. It no longer does. But it has to be there. So, you're going to create your own line type. You're going to say, well, let's say we wanted to have a line type that had 3 breaks instead of 2. We could take and copy that line type, go down to the bottom, just like with the ACAD PGP file, and say, let's call this something else. Let's just say we want this to be the way our, let's just say it's a water line of some kind. So waterline 2, call that water. And then here, again, we don't need to do anything here other than show basically what this thing is going to look like. Looks like that, I guess. So what we could do is to go in and got a space. Do another one here. Underline. And then we could do another one at the end. So that tells us what it's going to look like. Now that's not a standard line type, but you might want to create a line type like that or some other type of line that you could then put into a legend. So in order to make it look like what we want though, what we have to do is go here and say, yeah, we need to duplicate this process right here. We've got the negative and then it stops on a negative. So now we have to have another positive and another negative. So we'll copy those things. Go right here. Put in the comma, do that. So now what we've done is we've gone negative, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. We really need a negative there? Doesn't seem right. Let me look at something. Phantom 2, yeah, it ends with a negative. Okay. Oh yeah, we do need a negative because we need a space before the next one starts. So in other words, that's the space before the next long line starts in. So now I'm going to save this. I'm saving it to the same location that it was. And if you've forgotten where that location is, I didn't actually need to know it, but it's under app data roaming. That's in the, it goes even back further. So if we take a look here, it's Dan, user Dan, app data, roaming. It goes from roaming down to Autodesk, etc., 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 all the way down to the support folder. So I've saved that. I come back up to AutoCAD. And I'm now going to go and load a line type. So let's make a layer. I'll make a new layer. And we'll call that new layer water. I'll come over here to the line type. And I'm going to go and load that line type. Now when I go there, the drawing I'm in right now is a metric drawing. So it's looking in the ACAD ISO line type file. But that's not the one I just edited. The one I edited is called ACAD LIN. Those are the only two line type files that come shipped with AutoCAD. You can make more, and I'll show you one in a minute. So now if I bring that up and go down, the word water 2 shows up here. Looks like that. I pick OK, and I make water 2 the line type for the current layer. Now we'll make that the current layer. Come back out here. And I'll draw a line. I'll draw it down here. I'll draw a line that goes from here to here, and you'll notice I now have the 3 little gaps instead of the 2 little gaps for that line type. So that's how you define a line type that consists of gaps and line segments. If you want dots in it, use a length of 0. If you want to do the same thing for the ACAD ISO line type, you're going to have to open that up. So we'll do that. See if I can find that. Startup, Notepad. Okay, this is the ISO one. Now we go down and find the same line type we want to use as our basis, which is right here. Copy, go to the end. Notice how often I copy and paste, by the way, so I don't make a typing error, and it's just also much quicker. So now, once again, we'll call that water, and we'll put water right here. We don't really need to worry about what we put here, so I'm not going to, well, oh, I guess I will. We'll do another, whoop, let's see, underline, not the dash, so we'll just do that in a few different places. Alright, so now it looks right. And then we come down here and just duplicate the last 2 again. Might as well get that comma in there. We can put it right there. And then we'll save this one. Now this is the ACAD ISO line type file. You can see that here. So now when I go back, I'll make another new layer. Actually, it's going to be a problem because I just dawned to me. It's a little joke I make with my... Never mind. I know dawned to me is not correct. But All right, let's go back and get that back. I have to make a change. I'm in the same drawing for the purpose of illustrating this. I don't have two different drawings open. Well, why don't I open two different drawings? I'm going to start a new drawing. And that new drawing is going to be a metric drawing, so it's ACAD ISO. So now I'm going to go to layers. I don't have, well, I have the layer 0. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'll call it water. I'll go over here to line type, and I'll say let's load. It's going to load it from the ACAD ISO line type file. Because I defined water, it shows up now. And it shows up only because I defined it in that file and then saved it. So I'll assign this, do that. Now when I go back out, I draw a line, and I didn't make it current. So I'll make that line, put it on here for water. Now it's not long enough to break down apparently, so we'll bring it out a little further, and now it is. Oh, I see. We weren't zoomed in far enough to see it broken down. So there's your new line type there. Now that's the simple type of line, and we could also, if we wanted to, we could create a line type that had dots in it. And one of the things I've done with a dotted line type before is use it to make grid paper. So we in the ICAD, okay, this is the metric one. You can do both. If I take a look, there is a dotted line type. Well, there's dash dot, for instance. No one's called dot, yeah. And you'll notice it consists entirely of lengths that are 0, which is the dot, and then gaps in between. And the gaps in between here, in this case, are 6.35. What if I wanted a line type that had a dot every 5 millimeters? Because I want to use it to draw lines for grid paper, which is what I've done. Well, I'm going to make a new version then, and I'll say, let's take this, and I'll go down to the bottom, and I'll call this one Grid 5. Grid 5. I don't really need to do anything here because the spacing is only going to change, and instead of a -6, I'm going to have a -5. Now I save this, go back to my drawing, and I say let's go and make a new layer. New layer in this place I'm going to call grid. Go to line type and load. Find the grid 5 that I just created. Assign it. Make that the current layer. Now I'm going to put a line in here on that layer, and it's got a series of little dots, and although I can't snap to them, I can sort of zoom right in and give you an idea that the distance from here to here is 5 millimeters. So that allows you to set up a line type that is set up with a specific grid. And what I'll do is I'll create grid paper and draw those lines up and down, make sure they both start in the same place. That the endpoints are coincident, and in other words, I'll do a line from the end of this one and then go up. So now the spacing is the same all around. You plot that at a 1-to-1 scale, and I've got spacing of 5 in the dots. I've got spacing of 5 millimeters for each one, so I can use it for grid paper without having to go in and actually array all the dots. Now, all that's great, but the place that you really have some power is with the complex line types. And complex line types, let's go to ACAD LAN. Now I'm back in the ACAD LAN file. And the reason I'm flipping back and forth is to make sure you understand the distinction and that you're comfortable with both. Well, these are the complex line types that come with AutoCAD. And there really aren't very many of them. And, there are two different styles here. One of them uses what's called a shape file. So if you take a look at fence line 1, it's drawn with these zeros here. Those aren't really zeros. It just means they're going to have a fence line type that has circles on it. The circles come from a file called ltypeshape.shx. That's what AutoCAD calls a shape file. And there are circles in the shape file. There are boxes in the shape file. There are a few other things in this shape file, including batting, the worst line type ever developed, since it represents insulation and yet scales automatically so that it doesn't ever stay put. Terrible, terrible line type. But these all come from things called shape files. And unless you know what shapes are included in that, or unless you're willing to make your own shapes, which is a completely different process from anything else you've done in AutoCAD. In my book, I actually discuss how to do that. And there is a tool, an express tool for making shapes and making line types from them. I think for the most part, you might want to do that if you have some particular shape, but most of the line types I make that are complex simply have text in them. So that's a different kind of line type. It still uses shape files, but it uses a shape file that you actually have more control over and understand better, which is all the fonts that are built into AutoCAD, or that come shipped with AutoCAD. So if we come down here and we'll start, the first one that does that is hot water. We have the hot water supply line, and it shows you're going to have a line, a gap, HW for hot water, and then you go on from there. And then it tells you that the letter A, they all start with A. 0.5 is the length of the line segment. Negative 0.2 is the size of the gap. And then in brackets, in square brackets, and then in quotation marks, you put the text. The word standard refers to the text style to be used. Now, I don't like using standard as the name of a text style in AutoCAD. But the reason you can't delete it is because line type files use it. You could, as long as you knew that your line types would always be used with a text style that was called something other than standard, you could replace standard with Roman S, for instance. The problem is you send a drawing to somebody, or you try to use that line type in a drawing that doesn't already have a definition for based on Roman S or based on any other style, and it's going to throw an error. So I actually would recommend you leave that and then modify standard in the drawing and recognize that no matter what, it's still going to give you the text you want. Now, S stands for size. In this particular case, the size of the H and W are going to be 0.1 units. U has to do with the orientation. In this particular case, it's going to be oriented so that it lines right up with the line type. R is also something you could use, and the difference is that with U, it's always oriented so that you can read it, where with R, it actually comes in at an angle, at an angle of whatever you put in here, but it's always at that angle, so as you go around the line type, sometimes the text is upside down. So an R in here is going to make an absolute angle for the text, and U is going to make an angle that seems absolute till you get to the point where it has to flip upside down. X and Y are this location of the insertion points. So you'll notice that you go to the gap, then you move over 1/10 of a unit, and then down 1/2 of a 1/10. In other words, the text is going to be centered on the line because it's going to drop down by 1/2 of its text height. Then you have another gap on the other side of it. So now if you're thinking, gee, I'd like to make a complex line type, right click, copy that, come down here, come down here, well, I can do it up here, it doesn't matter. I'm going to paste that in place. So now I'm going to just use that as the basis for something else. And the basis I'm going to use it for is going to be a cold water line. So we'll say cold. And we'll change that to cold. And we'll change those to CW so that it displays correctly when it's showing you what type of line we're actually making. Now the reason I'm doing this is because I know there's enough room for the 2 letters because it works for HW, so it's going to have to work for CW. All I have to do now is go down where it's got the quotes and replace the H with a C. Now I'm going to save this. I just did a Control Z instead of a Control S, which undid what I just did. Alright, now Control S. I'm going to save this, come back out. Now I'm going to make a new drawing, and this drawing is going to be an ACAD drawing. So now when I go to the layer command and I make a new layer, and I'll call this cold water, and then I go down to line type and load it. It has a hot water line, but it also has the cold water supply as well. I'll say assign that line type to this layer, make it current, come back out. Now let's do this. So now you see it's got CW instead of HW. Seems very good. Now there's something to keep in mind. The font used is whatever is used to define standard. So watch what happens if I go back to standard and I decide I don't want Arial anymore. Instead I want, Well, it's not enough of a difference. Let's go find, how about City Blueprint? Where's City Blueprint? Or Country Blueprint, even easier to find? Right there, Country Blueprint. Now I've redefined standard. I set that current, say okay, come back out. Now that's what that font is going to look like. You have to be a little careful because no matter what you do, if you change standard so that it's based on a different font, you're going to have that affect this. And one of the fonts that's in here that, you've got all kinds of things. But for instance, you've got symbols for music. So you apply that and come back out, and now you don't have text anymore. You have whatever was assigned to that keystroke for music. That opens up the possibility, though, of making some really interesting complex line types. Before we get to the interesting complex line type, so let's go and put in, let's make a fire line. So we want the word fire to go in there. So I go back to that line type file, and I've done this before. I made a drawing of our entire campus and all the utilities, and I had a fire line, a gas line, a water line, and I just made line types because otherwise you're putting in line types that have to be identified in a legend, and people are always looking to see what does this line type represent. My feeling is put the word in that tells you what it is. If it's an air conditioning duct line type of some kind, just put in air conditioning or something else. Here's the problem. Now you have to fiddle around a little bit because, well, like gas line is already there. So if you had 3 characters you wanted to put in, you could easily make something out of gas line. But I don't want gas line, I want fire line. So I'm going to copy the gas line type, paste it, and again I'm now going to say, well, let's do water. So we actually have the word water there. So water line is what it's going to be called, and here I'll type in water. And then here we'll replace that with water. And I don't need the rest of that. Just get rid of it. Okay, so what do we do down here? We put in the word water. Here's the problem. I'm going to save this. Once again, I did Control Z instead of Control S. Control S. Alright, so it still says water, so we come back out. So now what I'm going to do is make another line type, and I'll call this my water line. I do have to change the standard text style back to being based on a font with actual letters. So I'll call that water. I come over here to the cold water line and I'm going to load it. And I'm just going to put the actual word water right there. Oop. I made a mistake. I typed water thinking it would come down here, but instead what it did is replace the font, the style, the file I was looking for. So I'm going to cancel that. Go back. So it's still looking at ACAD-LIN. Now I come, did it again. Now I come down here. I'm going to swing down through and look for water, which is right there, water line. Not water 2, that's the one I made before. So water line. Assign it to that layer. Make that layer current. So you'll see what I'm going to have for a problem here. First problem I'm going to have is you're not going to be able to read anything because the word water with that font doesn't look like anything. So we go back to the style command and I go, wait a minute, I want this to go back to Arial or Romanesque or whatever I want to use. Set that current now, come back out. So now that says CW again. This now says water again. The problem is I didn't leave enough space here. If you notice, I've got enough room here, but I don't have enough room there. So I need to go back and edit that file so that there's enough space that shows up here. So you have to do that when you make your line types. I'm not putting up with that. I don't want you to give me something that works but isn't really right. You're going to do it and have it set up so that you can use this over and over again. So if we go look over here, we got that line. We got the -2. Over here we have a -25. Here we have the text type. This just indicates the location. Things seem pretty good there, so maybe it's this end that we need to increase. So go over here and try it. I don't know. We'll just see what happens. Save that. Come back out. Now we go back to the line type command if we want. We can go back to layers, but we go back to the line type command. And what I want to do is to reload that line type. And again, I just saved it with that file name right there. So we go down and get water, the big water line. I say, yeah, let's do that. I said, do you want to reload it? Yeah, I want to reload that. Okay, so we reload it. Type regen. Got a little better. Not quite right though. So how are you going to do yours? You're going to do the same thing I just did. You're going to go, I think maybe I need just a little more space on the end. So you go back, open it up again, go in here and say, let's try 0.5 instead. And again, Control S, come back out, go back to the line type command, go back to load. Again, you could do this through the layer command as well, as long as you're loading it from the right place. So we're going to go down to the water line. Okay, reload it. Okay, comes out. We do a regen. Now it looks like that. That looks pretty good. That's what I want it to look like if you're going to do this. So now you've got an ability to put any length text you want as long as you define carefully what the spacing is. Now, the interesting possibility that this brings up is this. I'm going to go back into style and I'm going to make a new text style called Wingding1. I'm going to pick OK. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to set Wingding1 as the font that style is based on. And it is, I guess it's called Wingdings. So Wingdings happens to come up with all these funny little characters here. So we close it up. And I'm not going to use that as a font. Although, one thing you might do is start by just typing, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, etc., etc., just to figure out what you have for your options here. Now, all the Wingdings have these special funny little characters. The point is, you might find something here that works as a line type for you for a complex line type. I don't see anything right there, so let's try doing lowercase instead. A, B, C, D, E, F. All right, how about this one? I want a line type with the person's hand pointing like that. A, B, C, D, E, F. Now that's lowercase, is it? No, that's uppercase. Okay, so an uppercase F has a hand pointing to the right. Let's just say I want that as a line type. I wouldn't probably, but it's okay. We're just doing this as an example. And then I would go back to my line type file, and instead of using standard, I would use the name of the style that I created with that in it. So we'll go to here. We'll make that, and we'll call it, I just call it hand. I'll call that hand as well. There's no particular reason to change this except that it would be confusing to somebody looking at the indication of what it's going to look like if you didn't. So now we come down here, and instead of having the word gas here, we're going to have an uppercase F. I have an uppercase F, and instead of standard as the text style we're going to use Wingdings, or Wingding1, did I call it? Find out. Go back and see. What did I call that? Yeah, I called it Wingding1. You know what, though? Let's just call it Wingding, since that's what the font is called that it's based on. Or no, it's called Wingdings. So I just want the same name. It doesn't matter except it's easier for me to keep track. Alright, so now we'll go back to the text file. Which is this one right here. So we'll change that to Wingding. Now this is the style name, not the font name. So whatever font it's based on is what's going to be displayed here. So now I'm going to save that, go back, and we'll make another layer. And this new layer will have, we'll just call it hand, and we'll go over here and load the hand line type. I don't even know why I wrote the word hand in there. We can't really show that using that text file. There's nothing you can put in there that would look like that. So we'll set that current, pick OK, make that the current style. So now I have a line type that looks like this. And if I want more of those, I can just go and make that shorter, and then there'd be more hands coming in. So if I did, I'd come back here, come over here, and instead of that being a 1/2 inch, we can make that like 0.2. Save that again. Now we have to reload the line type. Once you load a line type, it's in the drawing. So if we're going to reload it, we have to go back and load that again from the... That's actually kind of a nice thing. You don't have to send the line type with somebody. If you have a line type file, it's loaded into the drawing itself. So now we'll go down and find that hand one again. I'm going to reload it so it comes in a second time. Yes, I really mean it. Okay, do that. Now you can see what we've got is twice as many little hands there. And you can also adjust the height of that. It does depend on using a font that has those kinds of characters. Now the last thing I want to show you about this, we have about 37 minutes. The last thing I want to show you about this is how to make an even more complex line type. And that has to do with a problem that I was faced with by somebody who insisted, who's a civil designer, civil engineer, insisted on having a property line that had a letter P and the letter L in the P slightly down and to the right as a recognition for the property line with a phantom line type. I actually said, why don't you just use a phantom line type, which is what everybody else does. But they wanted the PL in there. And I said, no problem, we just put PL just like we have CW. And that wasn't good enough because it had to be set up a certain way. In other words, it had to look like this. Let's go back and set a style that's current. All right. So it had to look like this, where you had the letter P, uppercase, and then the letter L, uppercase, and they had to overlap so they looked like that. That's what they wanted. So I thought, okay, if that's what you want, that's what you want. Let me see if I can figure out how to do it. And I did. So I'm going to load that line type. And in order to do that, I'll do another layer. And I've got this both in metric and in imperial. So I'll do another layer, and we'll call this property. I have my cap lock key on. And then we'll go over and get a line type. Now this line type is not coming from ACAD LAN. It's not coming from ACAD ISO LAN. I'm going to go look for another file that has a line type in it. And I have one that is in our folder. Not the folder for this class, but the folder for the AEDD260 class. And it's in a file called line type. And it consists of only 2 line types. Both of them called property. One for metric and one for inches. So it's got metric imperial and metric, property imperial and property metric. And it shows you it's going to be PL, PL, PL. So it starts over here defining essentially a phantom line. Then it has a little gap at the beginning, the letter P using the standard style, size is 0.1. I have a rotation angle here. I could change that actually to a U. They didn't used to have a U as an option. So we'll do that, and I'll change this one to U as well. Oh, wait a minute. No, I don't think I can do that. I know why I did that. It has to be absolute in this case because there's 2 letters. Otherwise, they rotate differently and they separate when you go around. So I have to leave that as an R. I think I better leave well enough alone. So then you've got the placement. Then I make this tiny little line in between that's 1/1000th of an inch long. Well, there's no such thing, but it's a little dot there. And then I have the L, and the L gets placed differently. Instead of going back 1/10 of an inch, unless instead of going back 1/10 of an inch, it goes back 7/100ths of an inch. And instead of going down 5/100ths of an inch, it goes down 7/100ths of an inch. And then has another little tiny gap, and then repeats the whole thing. So that's what it looks like as a line type as far as the definition goes. If we were to load that from the property line in our folder, and that's in 160 because we use that line type in one of the problems in 160. You may have remembered loading that. So now I've got 2 versions of it. Since the drawing I'm in is an imperial drawing, that's the one I'm going to pick. And then well, let's try that again. Why didn't that come up? I don't know, but when I tried it again, it did come up. So here it is. So okay, so now we've got the property line. We'll double click on that. Now when we draw a line, it comes in and it has, move that down here, it has the symbol that the that civil engineer wanted stuck in there. So that's and it's got the phantom line type as well. You could do the same thing with a center line type, the letter C and then the letter L for center line if you wanted to. That used to be the way people did it by hand. Again, I don't think it's necessary, but if that's what you want, that's what you want. So that's the presentation on line types. Now there's one more piece to this, and then one more piece of this is I also want you to create a custom hatch pattern. Now I'm not going to have you do much with hatch patterns because they're crazy complex, very hard to do, and you're just much better off finding somebody else that's already done it and using theirs. Or just use the hatch patterns that come with AutoCAD. But there's one hatch pattern that has always bugged me, does not exist in AutoCAD. It also doesn't exist in SolidWorks, by the way. And I've also recreated a line type in SolidWorks to do the same thing. And here's what I want. The problem I'm trying to solve is this. There is a knurl hatch pattern. Tell you what, let's go back and change the layer we're on. So we're not on the property layer anymore. We'll just go here. We'll put that on that layer as well. Okay, there's a knurled hatch pattern that we used to use, and that actually looks like a knurl. But there's no knurl hatch pattern in AutoCAD that works. The closest thing is this one. But that's not actually the knurl pattern, because the knurl pattern, that angle, instead of being 45, is 15 degrees shallower. It's 30 degrees. And instead of being 45 in that direction, it's 150. So instead of 100 and, let me think, 90, 135. Instead of 135, it's 150. So I don't like that hatch pattern. I really wish that there was a knurled hatch pattern. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and open up the hatch pattern command, file, and we're going to create a knurled hatch pattern in that file. That file is similar to the ACAD LAN file and the ACAD ISO file, LAN file, except it has a PAT extension instead. What are we in? We're in a drawing done in, okay, we're in an imperial drawing, so that's what I'm going to open up. So we'll do the Start App, Notepad trick again, find file. And again, the reason I'm doing this is to make sure I find the one that is in the path, the first one that's in the path. ACAD.PAT is the name of that file. It opens up and looks like this. Now these hatch patterns, some of them are quite simple, but boy, some of them are really, really, really crazy complex. But what I want, the one I just tried, looked like it was going to come close. It's just I don't like the angles, and that's the Ansi 37 hatch pattern. So what I'm going to do is go and find that hatch pattern right here. And there it is, Ansi 37. And that's the definition of the Ansi 37 hatch pattern. Now this is a little different than Linetypes in the sense that it does have an asterisk indicating what the name of this thing is, but it has 2 lines instead of 1. I'm going to copy that once again. Big fan of copying something that works and then trying it. Go to the end, paste it, and I'm going to make a change now. One, I'm not going to call it Ansi 36. I'm going to call it neural. And over here, I'll just, once again, asterisk K, neural. Once again, I'm just going to call this neural. Now, instead of 45, what I want to do is subtract 30 from that and get 15. And instead of, is that what I want to do? Let me think about that. I want that to be, no, I want that to be 30. So I want to subtract 15 from it and get 30. And in this particular case, I want to add 15 to that and get 150. So now I've got the new neural pattern. I'm going to save that, come back, and now I'm going to go to the hatch command, and I'm going to see if neural shows up here. Now, sometimes you have to look for it. It doesn't necessarily show up in the place you would expect it. Let's see where it showed up this time. And I might have to start a new drawing in order for that to work. Let me see. So I'll start a new drawing here. We'll put our rectangle in here. We'll go to the neural command. I'm sorry, the hatch command. There is a neural command, but all right, now where is right there. See why I said it comes in a weird kind of place. That's not where I would have expected it. But you see, that's the one I just created. I come down and I pick that. I probably want to change the scale so that it looks a little better here. And now you see what I've got. That is what a neural looks like when you cut a neural in machining. So I want you to make a neural hatch pattern. And you can do exactly what I just did and do that for both inches, imperial, and metric. And then your assignment is to have custom line types. Those you'll have to look on Brightspace to see what the specifics are. But you'll create a number of line types there that are both complex and the simple ones. And you're going to have one hatch pattern I want you to create. You can go ahead and make other hatch patterns if you want. And you can experiment all you want with the hatch patterns. I just found that it's really frustratingly difficult to create a hatch pattern that makes any sense that doesn't already exist. This is the one that I've always wanted. All right, we've got about a little under an hour for this, so I'm going to cut this now, and that's the assignment for line types and hatch patterns.